What's up, guys? We're back with a Star Wars Black Series review, taking a look at the most recent wave of figures. This is basically the Boba Fett wave, at least that's how most folks are calling it, I believe. So we've got 8 distinct figures in this case, 2 of which did come out in that Cantina Showdown set from PulseCon, but if you didn't buy that, there are 8 new figures here that you don't have, and 6 that nobody has. Well, I mean, unless you've already gotten this wave before me. So we're taking a look at, of course, Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan briefly, because I did already look at those. They'll be featured, but I'm not going to go into detail on them here. The other 6 figures are where it's really at. So we've got Boba Fett in his Tython getup, we've got FENNEC Shand, we've got Yavin Princess Leia, we've got Migs Mayfeld, we've got a Jedha Stormtrooper, and Bib Fortuna. Of course, these all come in the new current standard style packaging, so that sort of black trapezoidal packaging. Figure there in the window, artwork that runs down one spine, and a larger shot of that artwork on the back with a tiny little bio for every figure in this wave. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. Now we're going to start with obviously one of the most anticipated figures in this wave because it's Boba Fett, so here we are. I'm taking the soft goods off, not because they really get in the way, because they don't, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And while they don't really get in the way, they really don't get in the way at all, honestly. They just hinder everything in terms of seeing what's going on. You're not going to be able to see what is moving and how it moves, just that it can move. So let's see what he can do, see how he moves around. He moves pretty good. There are a few weird things about his construction that make him a little bit different, but let's see. So we've got a head that can look up really good. He can look down pretty good too. You've got some tilt side to side, full rotation up there. Arms go out at the shoulders. They're not fully extended, but they're out. And then you've got rotation. He does have a slight butterfly joint in there. I actually missed this at first and noticed it later while I was messing with him. And it's in there. It's pretty good. I keep forgetting about these because they're so hit or miss on Black Series figures, whether they have them or not. And of course, he has an overlay. So if you're not looking at him from the side, you can't really see him. It helps a little bit, not a lot. Arms are really nicely done. For single jointed elbows, he's got great range on it. You've got that and rotation, of course, so there's rotation there. You've got hinges and rotation at the wrist. You've got a lateral hinge on his left. The right is a vertical hinge, though. You've got kick back on the torso. It's a single buck, so you've just got one piece of movement here, forward and tilt side to side, and there's also rotation there. We've got legs that go out about this far, and then they kick forward. They kick backwards, and they've got thigh cut there, which of course looks just awful because it's supposed to be this big baggy pant. And then you've got this knee, which is, I don't know, it's really unsightly. It does function well, like there's nothing getting in the way. You've got this big flap hanging down though. It's just very ugly. And then you've got rotation at your boot cut. We've got rocker, and we've got hinges down there too. So he is very par for the course for what I think of like a really well articulated modern Black Series figure is, but he does have some oddness when it comes to just the legs in general because of the style of clothing he's supposed to be wearing and how that translates into something that has to be carved up to articulate. Now, aesthetically, though, I am pretty happy with him, and, you know, again, still no soft goods on him just yet because I want to continue with what's going on here. He really has 2 distinct looks because he has the soft goods, you know, that kind of early appearance, and then, of course, you have this, and there's a lot going on underneath that, that cloaked robe that he wears. Tons of different textures on this figure, from like the baggy sleeves on the arms to this kind of soft overlay with the texture on the shirt, the collar around the neck, you know, the bandolier with all of these you know, charges in it, and then of course the very baggy pants, which, you know, they look pretty ridiculous, honestly, in many ways. I get the idea here, but in some ways it just doesn't work all that well. Some ways it does. You know, you've got this like sash that hangs down, but he's supposed to have these really big billowing, you know, pants or whatever they're supposed to be. And I get it. You know, I don't know if this would work really any other way. I'm not really sure. I don't know if like a big overlay would have worked better or not. Probably not, right? But this does present sort of some weird design choices when it comes to how he articulates. You know, again, this humongous knee joint is pretty unsightly. It's just pretty weird. But he overall, like when he's standing neutral, you kind of don't worry about it anymore, and he does look pretty good. Again, tons of different textures on this figure. You've got like the gray boots, you've got the baggy pants, the baggy shirt, and then this overlay with the bandolier, and I think he looks really good. You do have the holster that's attached, of course. It does kind of get in the way a little bit, not too much, but it does get in the way just a little bit when it comes to popping that knee, or that leg out rather. And I think he does look good. You know, he does have a few concessions in terms of how he is structured, because there's a lot of different types of clothing going on here. But otherwise, I am pretty happy with him. And then, of course, you know, he is topped off with this new head sculpt that we're getting that I think, for the most part, does look pretty close to Temuera Morrison. It's not exact. Like, there's, in some instances, you might kind of lose him a little bit, but in other angles, I do think he looks really good. You've got varying sort of finishes on the head as far as, like, the sort of, I don't know, almost tired eyes is what it kind of looks like. You've got the scars running down the face and everything like that. So I do think they've done a pretty good job of translating this likeness into figure form. You know, it's a different version of a man. We've got a few different head sculpts on at this point, and I think this is another solid entry in that line of however many Fetts we're going to get. And then, of course, here he is with this hooded robe on. And again, this is how he comes packaged in the box. So this is how you're going to get him when you first open it. And I think for the most part, this does look pretty good. It's not wired or anything like that, but I think the material feels all right. It hangs pretty well on him. It's not too big. It's certainly not too tight, because it's easy to take off, and it's fairly easy to put back on. It's not the most fun to do on camera, but it does work pretty well. You can fully pop that hood up. I do think this part might be a little big on him, but it does really cloak him in shadow if you kind of get it to cinch down just right. And then you can just sort of, what I've been doing is just sort of rolling it back almost, and then it'll sit really well to expose the whole head sculpt. And I think it looks a lot better this way. This is kind of how it comes out of the box. And like I said, it doesn't really get in the way of his articulation. The only instance where I had a problem is like not knowing exactly which way the elbow was pointing, and then you have to worry about if you're bending it the wrong direction. But otherwise, I do think it looks pretty good. And honestly, I'm not too sure how I'm going to display him, because I do kind of like him this way, but I also really like him underneath without the robe too. Again, like I said, two very distinct looks. And then he also does come with a few accessories. Well, he actually comes with a pretty good handful for a Black Series figure. So to start with, we get his pistol here. So of course you can holster that. It's just a little very Star Warsy blaster, kind of graphite color with a little brown on the handle there. We get a gaffy stick, which of course is pretty fitting for this guy at this point. So you've got kind of a gold finish here, and then your standard, more normal gaffy stick. It does have a rope string around it, so you can cinch it around his back. And then we've also got his sniper rifle also. So you've got some of that, more of that brown, a little more of that gunmetal, and then some gold accents. And it's got a plasticky strap, which you can kind of freely move around the gun, depending on how you want to put it on him. And you can also holster this over his shoulder, or it can go around his back. So, I mean, it's not a lot of stuff, but I hate to say it, for a Black Series figure, this is honestly quite a bit. He's almost bordering on deluxe territory, isn't he? So he does have a pretty solid array of stuff. I mean, tons of new figure here, really, that looks really good no matter what. I mean, weird knees aside, he's still a very good-looking figure. Comes with soft goods, comes with 3 different weapons. It's a pretty solid package overall. Next up, we've got our Migs Mayfeld figure, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in thinking that this is not the version that I wanted to get first. Of course, you know, this is not his first appearance in the show. This is more, you know, his season 2 look, where he is, of course, in this instance, in disguise. So there's a lot of reuse of trooper parts here, which is fine. I mean, he certainly does wear this in the show, but I'm quite certain that everybody wanted that first appearance, especially with like the shoulder-mounted cannon and all that stuff. So, you know, maybe we'll get that later. But let's see what he can do, see how he moves around. I'm going to remove the helmet for now, just to show you what he's doing under there. So we've got a head that can look up. He can look down pretty good. Tilt side to side really nicely. You've got full rotation, of course. Arms out at the shoulder. They rotate. We've got our single jointed rotating elbow. It's better than 90. And then we've got our hinges, and we've got rotation. You've got your diaphragm cut here, so he goes backwards. Forwards, not as much, but he goes backwards pretty good. You've got your tilt side to side, and that's your rotation point. Legs go out only about this far because there is no slit on the side, it's on the front. So they kick forward really good, but they don't kick out to the side all that well. Backwards, you've got your thigh cut there. We've got double jointed knees. And then we've got our hinge, and this foot has been really janky for me. So his left, your right at the moment is kind of weird for me, but it does have all that range. It just sort of sticks in one of those detents, and then he's got a pretty good rocker down there too. So, you know, it's a trooper body basically. So nothing too crazy there, really. I think for the most part, this is going to be one of those figures that I could see people army building, because this is a unique look for this particular style of trooper, you know, like a tank driver almost. So it is different, but of course it is still very familiar territory. Lots of greens and sort of muted colors. I do think the helmet is of course a little bit on the big side compared to other figures of this nature because it is removable. So there is of course, as you saw, a head sculpt under there. But I do think the sculpt is nice. The colors are good. Like this guy's going to stand out on the shelf because he is a different color. So if you do want to go down the road of army building this particular trooper, you can do that. Or if you just want your Bill Burr, you've got the option and you can just buy the one. I do think overall he looks pretty good though. You know, there's some dirtiness to it. So he's got various goops and you know, washes and dry brushings all over him to bring out some of the detail. It's maybe a little on the haphazard side, but he's okay. Mostly my interest in this figure lies in what's going on here. And that would be this head sculpt. And I think it's okay. This is kind of the same situation as the Boba figure, where I think in the wrong angle, you're going to lose that sort of likeness. Like, I think, you know, like on the side, I think that looks a lot like Bill Burr, but looking right on him, I feel like I kind of lose it a little bit. But when it's from the side, I think it looks pretty good. So your mileage may vary, of course, on what you think you see here, but I think for the most part it's pretty good. Photo printing's nice and clean and crisp. I've got no issues with it as far as you know, any kind of splotchiness or anything like that. So he looks okay. Colors on that beard are all right. It definitely looks like him, but how close that likeness is, I suppose, is going to be up to you. I think it's pretty good. Better from the side than it is from the front. And then he gets one weapon, one accessory, if you don't count the helmet, if I can get it out of this holster because it's super tight in there. So you get this little pistol, which we've seen this thing before. There is like no paint on it. It's kind of greeny brown, mud, nasty kind of color. And then it will sit in the holster on his belt there. So he's okay. He's a pretty good figure. I mean, if you want to army build this guy, you've got the choice because, of course, plop that helmet back on him and he becomes just a nameless soldier in the Imperial forces. Or you can just buy him once and you've got your Bill Burr head. Take it off, maybe put it on a different figure if you need him to be more uniquely Bill Burr rather than Trooper Migs Mayfeld. Switching over to one of the big three, we've got our Princess Leia figure from this wave. So of course this is a very specific point in time for Leia. End of A New Hope, end of episode 4, so Yavin ceremony. And this is an interesting figure because this is definitely one of those ones that has very little dynamic potential. She is very limited in her design, specifically in one big area. So let's see what she can do, of course. So we've got a head that really can't do much but looks slightly down because of her hair. It stops her from looking any further up than that. You can tilt side to side pretty good, and then you've got rotation, but you've got to watch her hair because she's got the long braid this time around. Arms go out at the shoulders. They rotate. You've got to watch the soft goods because they're cinched inside of that joint there, so be careful with how you move it. We've got a single jointed rotating elbow, of course. You've got hinges and rotation at the wrist. Pretty standard stuff there. And then we've got her waist. So she's a single torso piece. This piece does not really want to do anything. I mean, it really doesn't want you twisting it too far because of how it's put together. Like, I really think they intended you to not do that, frankly. So your mileage may vary, but it really fights you when you do that, so be careful. And then we're going to get real weird with it, and we're going to just do this, you know. Avert your eyes, kids, and you can see her space underwear as we do articulation here. So her legs go out only slightly. They kick forward all the way. They kick backwards. You've got your thigh cut. It's really tight. We've got double jointed knees, and then we've got our rocker, and we've got hinges down at those ankles. The dress doesn't exactly get in the way too much. Like, it gets in the way of her going out at the side, but it doesn't really do much more anyway. And then kicking forward, you know, you can do pretty good, but she has more potential if it were off. But of course, that's not going to make much sense anyway. So she is pretty limited in many respects because, frankly, you know, they just sort of intended for you to have her on the shelf, standing there, holding a medal, putting it over someone's head, that kind of thing. I don't think in any capacity that this figure was meant to have any sort of dynamic potential. That said, I think she looks okay. Like, there's a lot here that's just kind of, it's another Leia figure. It looks okay. The soft goods are fine. They're not blowing my mind or anything like that. These things definitely, it's like cheeseclothy kind of stuff. It's sort of supposed to, you know, sort of fall backwards on her, and it looks okay. It's kind of hard at times to get it to sit down correctly. She is a figure that falls victim to them not wanting to give her the correct hands, so she has a trigger finger hand and no gun, which is a huge, huge pet peeve of mine. So, you know, there's that to deal with right there. We've got a trigger finger hand with no weaponry for her, but she is just a pretty plain figure. The torso is sculpted okay. The necklace is sculpted on. You've got the bracelet over here. We've got her, you know, silver pumps down there at the bottom, and then the belt. But it's a pretty basic figure, and that's really where it kind of starts and stops for me. She's okay. She's not the most exciting figure. She's not by any means my favorite Leia. That still kind of goes to Hoth Leia at the moment, but I'm really happy overall with just the idea behind this, and it's okay. Like, if you want to have a Yavin ceremony scene, this is going to work. It's just not all that exciting. She can be a really good figure, but also be not very exciting, if that makes any sense. I do think the head sculpt is pretty nicely done. It's, again, not the best Leia that we've seen. I still think that falls, you know, to some of the most recent Leias, Endor Leia, Bespin, Hoth Leia, those. But the likeness on this one is pretty good. I'm not too upset with the way she turned out. There's a nice bit of color on her cheeks. The lips look good. Photo printing on the eyes is really nice. The hair is really well done. The braid that sits on top is nice, and then of course the big braid that runs down the back is also really well done. So there's a lot of good about this figure, but there's also some bad too. It's kind of a middle of the road kind of figure. And then we do have one Yavin ceremony medal. So if you want, you know, you don't have two from her, you can give one Han, and then, you know, you can be really nice about it and finally give Chewie one if you want to switch things up. So she does get one accessory. It doesn't take advantage of this hand, but she does include at least one thing. And then we've got a brief intermission between sets of new figures to briefly talk about these guys. I'm not going to run through them. There is an entire review where I go through both of these figures, so if you haven't checked that out, go ahead and look at the Cantina Showdown set. These two are the exact same figures, so if you've already got that set, you know exactly what's happening. If you don't, again, go check out that review. But both are really solid figures. There is a lot of reuse going on with Ponda Baba. He's essentially a Yavin Luke with a different head sculpt and hands. He is missing some accessories this time around compared to that Cantina Showdown set. He does not have the sucker hands, so that is an exclusive item from that set. But Dr. Evazan is basically the same thing. They both look fantastic. Good sculpt, good paint job, pretty decent articulation on both. They don't really come with a whole lot of stuff. They come with their respective blasters, and that's really it in this particular wave. But if you're looking to build out your Cantina scene, well, these are the first two figures you really need that are outside of our core cast of characters. This guy, though, is one that I have been dying to get for a very long time. That said, this is kind of a mess in many ways. I do think he looks good. He's kind of one of those figures that you almost want to say, I wish they gave him soft goods instead of what they did to him, though, because he is very, very hard to move around, at least for me. He has multiple layers of rubbery material covering the figure, 2 layers that actually peg into each other, and then, like mine, the head just wants to not stay in, basically. So we've got a head that can look up a little bit. I mean, he's got a whole mess going on. He's got a lot of business going on up here. He can look down really good, though, because he has a super, super long neck back here that is also articulated. He can tilt side to side. He can rotate, but only so far before everything starts to, like, kink up a little bit. Arms are tangled up in this mess of robes. So they sit in this little slit here, and they can go out, but, like, they can't go out, and they can't rotate all the way around either. They can really only go that far. They can hinge pretty good. He's got a single jointed deep cut elbow with rotation. You know, you've got hinges and rotation at those wrists, so that's normal stuff there. But you're going to find that, at least for me, like I keep popping these plates out, basically. Like the robe that he's wearing is two pieces of plastic that sits over top of each other, and then one pegs into each other, which is... I don't know, it's not the most enjoyable experience for me. There is a, waist twist here, but it's really, really, really resistant to moving. Like, it doesn't want to, it's not as bad as Leia's, but this one, I mean, like, I almost feel like I'm breaking him when I do that. So watch out, I guess. The legs are the same kind of thing. So you've got this, and then you've got this, which has slits on the side, so the legs can go out. But you're not going to be able to use them. They kick forward. They don't really go backwards. You've got a thigh twist up in there, but you're not going to be able to use it. He's got a double jointed knee, but you're not going to be able to use it. And then you've got rocker, and you've got hinges down at those ankles. Now, all that said, because it does sound like I'm super, super unhappy and complaining here. And I'm not exactly the happiest, but I'm also not super upset about it either, because... I mean, this guy doesn't do anything. He doesn't do anything in the movie, really. I mean, he obviously plays a role, but he doesn't do anything dynamic. He's going to be someone that stands alongside your palace denizens with Jabba. So he's going to look fine, but he's definitely very, very hindered by his design. Everything about this weird, layered, rubbery oversuit that he has and the robes, it just very much counterintuitive to him being an action figure. He very much just is like a traffic cone. He reminds me a lot of that Moloch figure from the Solo waves, the deluxe one at Target, where he was just a big traffic cone. He was also a big slug that had no legs, but this is different. He does have legs. They just can't really move very well because there's so much stuff in the way. So if he had soft goods, it would be all right, but at the same time, he would probably need more than the Black Series could afford. So that sounds like a lot of griping. He moves very poorly, I think, but he still looks pretty solid. I do have some questions over like all the blue that's on him, because I don't really see that a lot of times. Like, you can see subtle hints of it, but I'm almost wonder if it's a little too heavy-handed on his montrol there and the actual head sculpt. But the head sculpt does look good. I mean, it's gnarly and nasty looking. He's pretty gruesome looking, so I do like that. I love the hand sculpts that they gave him. Normally I don't harp on this kind of stuff too much, but it does work. He's got a gripping hand, and then he's got this very emotive, very expressive hand, which I do really like. So you can use this, when he's talking to Jabba or Luke or whoever. So I do really like that. The blues on the inner robes, as hard as they are to see, they do look really good. They're nice and vibrant compared to the brown. And then they've got some gray accents on them. But for the most part, it's really all about like the hands and the head and then this outer robe, which, while again, very restrictive, I do think looks pretty good, and it kind of sells it. I am not exactly the happiest about these weird pegs. Like, they keep popping out. So, I might have to like glue them together or something. They probably were supposed to be, and I probably broke them, honestly, trying to figure out how to move this guy. So he moves poorly, but I think he looks pretty good, so I'm happy with that. He doesn't really come with anything exciting as far as accessories goes, and I feel like his accessories were very much an afterthought. So if you got the Cantina Showdown set, you've already got these. He comes with the same cups that we had in that set. So there's this gray one, there's a white one, and there's a brown one. And they're the exact same one, so it's not even like they did a second run with different colors, so they didn't even want to give you different colored cups. These are the same colors, same cups that come in the Cantina set. So if you don't have the Cantina set, You get 2 of those figures and some of what were exclusive accessories for, you know, what, a month in that with the Cantina. You get them with Bib Fortuna here. I kind of wish that he came with something else, you know, like the staff or a gun or whatever, stuff that he's had with other figures in the past, but they did not opt to do that here, to his detriment, I think. The one actual trooper in this wave is very much mostly a repack. So we've got a Jedha Patrol Stormtrooper here, which is just our new Stormtrooper with a pauldron, and then he comes with this monster backpack you can put on him, which is kind of hard to put on, and it is huge. I mean, it's really, really big. It's also got this big antenna thing on it. So if you've got one of the modern Stormtroopers, you kind of know what to expect. He can look up a little bit. He is a little bit hindered here because of the pauldron. It really gets in the way. It looks down slightly. You've got your rotation, not really any tilt though. Arms go out at the shoulder. They do rotate, but you're going to have to work around this backpack, so that kind of gets in the way. There is the bicep, or the butterfly joint in there, rather. We've got our deep cut single elbows with rotation. You've got your hinge and rotation at that wrist. We've got our diaphragm cut, but of course this guy's meant to use the backpack, so when it gets in the way, it gets in the way. If you just want a Stormtrooper, you really don't need to buy this guy, right? So he tilts side to side really, really good. You do have some pivot for rotation there, a little bit on the kick backwards, and then a good bit forward. The backpack does get in the way, sending him backwards, because of course it starts to hit, but it's actually carved out to take into consideration for the canister back here, but it still does hit. Legs go out only that far. They kick forward, backward a good bit. You've got your thigh cut. We've got a single jointed rotating knee, of course. And then we've got our rocker, and we've got hinges down at those ankles. So, I mean, a normal Stormtrooper. The only difference is that you have to take into consideration this backpack. It does have some balance concerns as well, but it's really not easy, or not difficult rather, to get him standing or to pose him. It's just you have to find, as with every other figure with a big lump on their back, you have to find his center of gravity. And then in that same vein, this guy is something we've all got. Well, you've already got this guy. I don't know, I've got him way too many times over. So it's a new Stormtrooper. This is my preference when it comes to Black Series Stormtroopers. I am happy to have retired that original mold. This is a much more nice looking figure. It's much more accurate in many ways. So I do like that. You know, I'm not going to run through this Stormtrooper because I've had to do it so many times in the past. Sculpt is good. Not really any paint on this body for the most part, but it does look really nice. Helmet looks good. Of course, you know, there is a head under there, if you can maybe see it peeking through. One of those blank heads is under there if you want to get crazy with it. Mine came out of the box pretty nice. No real issues to speak of in terms of warping. I don't remember the last time I actually noticed one of those to be warped, so this thing seems okay to me. Paint on the head, or helmet rather, does look pretty nice. And then we've got, you know, the big thing that makes this guy different is this backpack. I don't even know what this is supposed to be. Honestly, I have no idea. And I'm not going to take the time to really look because it doesn't matter. It's a big monster backpack, so he can be like one, you know, of a squad that looks like this, you know. And I think he does look pretty good this way. It makes him very unique. It is kind of a pain to put on because from what I could tell, it doesn't come apart, or at least mine did not want to. So if it does, mine didn't. But I don't think it does. So you got to kind of bend those arms around to get it in, get the straps in, and get one underneath that pauldron also. But it does have some paint on it for, you know, like whatever this like rucksack is supposed to be in there, and then whatever these bits and bombs and doodads are on the back do look good. The antenna piece does come separate, so you have to put this on. It's just a long antenna, pops into this hole. I've knocked it out about 20 times, not noticing that it was there, but it is very, very big. I mean, look how huge that thing is. It makes the figure, you know, like 8 inches tall roughly with that on him, if you want to actually call it that. So it does have this one big thing to differentiate it and make it stand out from the Trooper pack, which I do like. And then he does come with our Stormtrooper kind of heavy blaster, and this thing's kind of weird because of how it's made. This is seemingly made out of like that metallic pearlescent kind of plastic. Like you can see it maybe kind of shine in the light, and on the trigger and then this little sight up here, it's translucent, so it's thin enough that you can actually see through that plastic. So this is kind of odd. It's weird how this one's made. There's no paint on it, but it does seemingly come made up in a different plastic than I would normally have expected it to. And then last but certainly not least, quite possibly the most, because this might be the best figure in the wave, honestly. There is a lot of good stuff going on with this particular figure here, and FENNEC SHAND is one that I've been excited to get. You know, as her role has been ramping up over time, I'm excited to actually have her in figure form, and I think she looks pretty solid and moves pretty nicely here. So you can get her to look up a little bit. She looks down really good. We've got crazy tilt side to side, full rotation, of course. Independently articulated neck also, she can kind of bob in and out. Arms go out at the shoulders, all the way around. There is no butterfly joint up there. We do have our single jointed rotating elbows. Pretty good, not as good as Boba's, but pretty good. And then we've got hinges and rotation at those wrists. These are a lateral hinge on this side, and then we've got a vertical hinge on this side, which of course is always a plus. And then we've got our diaphragm cut, so she goes backwards. Forward's really good, tilt side to side, and full rotation there also. So really nothing getting in the way. Legs go out only about this far. The robes that she has, the skirt piece, it does want to go with her, so it's not super in the way, but it also does stop her also. We've got legs that kick forward about that far. They do kick backwards slightly. You've got a thigh cut up in there. You've got your single jointed rotating knee, of course. And then we've got a no boot cut, which is kind of unfortunate because, you know, she does have a spot for one, but it's so close to the knee that it's probably not a big deal either. And then you've got rocker, and you've got hinges down there at those ankles, nothing getting in the way of those either. So she is, you know, pretty normal for like the modern Black Series figure. The only thing she doesn't have that Boba has, I guess, is you know, comparing the two because they're the most related in this set really, is that he has the butterfly joint and she does not. Otherwise though, I think she moves really nicely. Nothing really gets in the way for her. You know, all that said though, my favorite aspect of this figure is the aesthetics and the looks on this one because, well, she looks pretty close to perfect. This is definitely the best head sculpt and likeness in this wave. You know, Boba's probably second as far as actual likeness goes, and I still think his is slightly off at times. This is really close to Ming-Na Wen's actual look. You know, in real life, I think it's really close to her. It looks really nice. The head sculpt is really well done. Really good photo printing. You've got all of this paint up in her hair. I'm not really sure what that's supposed to be, but she's got a lot of it, and it's clean and crisp. But the face printing is just tremendous on what is obviously a very nice sculpt. I'd love to see what somebody who has, you know, any amount of painting skill can do to bring it out even more, because I'm sure there's a lot more detail that we're just waiting to see. But the rest of this figure also is really well done. Tons and tons of different texture on her, and I couldn't be really like overstating that because literally everything has like something different on it in terms of geometric patterns almost. There's patterning on her sleeves, and then you've got these banded gauntlets. You've got all of this patterning up here around the collar, and then the stripes on her chest, more patterning on the breastplate, and then you've got the wraps on her stomach. You've got this sort of triangular patterning on the skirt piece here with more patterning on the thighs with like these bands that go down to the same kind of thing we see on the wrist. And you've even got some texture down here on the boots. You've got you know, like a shoulder pad here on the back. We've got a little doodad control pad or something on her belt. So there's a lot going on, and I also really like the color scheme too. A lot of black in various sort of textures and then finishes, but then you've also got, you know, of course, orange, so it does it for me there. So you've got a few little bits of orange just to break her up a little bit, and it makes her have a very Star Wars-y look, but also something that is pretty unique too. So she's going to stand out on your shelf, and she's definitely going to stand out amongst a bunch of the other Mandalorian characters who, you know, don't really have this kind of color scheme at all. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then we've got her accessories, which, you know, obviously she gets her helmet. So you can pop this on, so it's obviously a removable helmet. And her helmet is kind of weird. I mean, it's obviously meant for like a sniper, but I think it looks pretty good on her. It does seem to be maybe a tad big because, of course, it has to fit on the head sculpt that is appropriately sized. But I think it looks good. It's got slots for her hair to come out on the side. A little bit of weathering on it on the side panel here. And just the colors look nice. There's even more weathering up on the top also. So you've got the options to display her, you know, with with helmet or without. It is kind of a tight fit, so you might have to, you know, fight with it to get it on and off. There we go. But once it's on, it's going to stay on for sure until you want it off. And then, of course, we also get her rifle too, which is new and a unique sculpt, and it's got a nice you know, bandolier on the back, so we can put it on her, well, correctly anyway. If we wanted to sling it around her shoulder, so you can have it sort of hanging behind her. You just got more of that orange and black color scheme. The gun itself is nicely done, looks really good. There's not really much paint on the gun, if any, none. But it's that sort of normal Star Wars blacky sort of gray color, not the odd pearlescent translucent that we got with the Stormtrooper, but a more normal style of gun. So she does come with, you know, not a lot. It's not as much as Boba comes with, but I do really like what she has. The helmet looks good, the gun is unique, and it also looks good. But the figure in particular is really well made. She moves really well, and of course just looks great. There's a lot going on with just giving her this black and orange color scheme, and the fact that they gave her 15 different kinds of textures and finishes makes all of that stand out that much more. So overall, this wave is pretty solid, but it does have a lot of weird little hang-ups for me at times too. I think Boba's a really solid contender in this wave for sure. He does, of course, have some oddness when it comes to some of those joints, especially those knees. Like they're just ugly, but otherwise I think he's a pretty fantastic figure. FENNEC Shand is obviously up there. She's probably going to be like the big hit of this wave, I think, or at least a surprise hit for sure. Mayfeld is okay. It's mostly that head sculpt that saves an otherwise boring green trooper. Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan, of course, solid figures in their own right if you don't already have them. Leia is interesting, though. She has a lot of hang-ups as far as being an action figure, but she looks pretty good, and at the end of the day, she's probably only going to be standing still anyway. The same goes for Bib Fortuna, who looks really solid, but he has some odd accessories for him as a figure, and he is incredibly locked down because of his design with all of those plated robes that he's wearing and just sort of draping all over him. And then, of course, we're rounded out by a Stormtrooper, which is, again, another Stormtrooper, but one that has this fancy, crazy new backpack, which does change him up just enough to make him at least somewhat exciting for sure. Maybe you don't need a bunch of them, but he'll be nice to throw into a squad. So that's going to do it for this look at the Black Series, whatever we're calling it, Boba Fett Wave. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.